also ask question 3, beginning with candidate 3.
Okay, so we received several questions regarding the minimum wage, but we chose to highlight this one because the person who sent it in gave us a little bit of a backstory. As a small employer living in District 34, I have a question regarding the state minimum wage. Over the last 10 years, my business has employed over 50 low-skilled workers at wages above the current minimum wage. Many of them were summer help, including children of current employees gaining their first experience in a workplace. Many have moved on to new opportunities with the experience they gained. A number of these hires still work for me, earning well above the median income in the state, having grown in their roles here. There's a national movement to push the minimum wage to $15. In my business, this would have prohibited a majority of those opportunities. Where do you stand on the general issue of a $15 minimum wage, and would you support state legislation to advance the minimum wage?
Thank you. So, as we all know, that Rhode Island is ranked dead last in business friendliness, and that's from the CNBC poll. So I think the first issue we really need to address in this state is the business friendliness and making it a better state for business. For example, decreasing the employment tax rate, it's the highest, and decreasing the corporate tax, and then the regulatory burden, the regulations that are so burdensome to our state and our businesses. So I think that we should focus on that, and also not introducing legislation that would harm businesses. Recently, the Fair Work Bill was introduced, which would have devastated businesses, and also the toll bill is another form of taxation on businesses. So I really think we need to focus our efforts on making the state more business friendly, and because how can businesses survive and pay employees if they're struggling themselves to just do business in the state of Rhode Island? So of course it would be nice to have a higher wage, but we need to look at our businesses first. Thank you.
Thank you. This is something I've certainly thought a lot about, owning a business. If we jump to $15 an hour minimum wage, that would put so many businesses right out. You'd be right off the map. And I think one of the things that needs to be thought of and discussed is the minimum wage versus the living wage. When you hire that teenager at 16 or 15 with their working papers, to come into the workplace and have their first job and their first experiences, I don't believe that's a living wage. That's a minimum wage. That's a wage to give someone experience. That's a wage to get them, their first foot in the door about the working process. And maybe that's where the divide needs to be in this country. Because the teenager that's working for the minimum wage and living at home certainly doesn't need, $15 an hour pay. The adult that is trying to raise their family, if they're on the minimum wage, yes, that needs to be a living wage. So there needs to be some thought and some discussion where you're going there. I am for increasing the minimum wage, but certainly not all at once, and I think it's something that needs to be very, very thoughtfully planned out. It would certainly have to be done over time and incrementally, but I do think that in this country we might want to consider the difference between the minimum wage and the living wage. Thank you.
And 2.
Thank you. So the argument that there should be a differentiation between a living wage and a minimum wage is part of the reason why women today are paid 70 cents on the dollar for every man. That idea that a man is the one who takes care of the family and is the breadwinner is part of that distinction and the origination of that distinction, and I don't look to further cement those types of stereotypes into the workplace. We look at the Ford Corporation, right? It's kind of the case study for this. They believed that their employees were also customers, and that if their own employees couldn't afford their product, then what good would producing this product be? And they paid their employees a living wage. I am a ardent supporter of the Fight for 15 for direct care workers. As Representative Fogarty mentioned earlier, this is something that we have these individuals who are caring for our family members in nursing homes, in hospitals, and we're expecting them to do this kind of work, this very physical, difficult work, and make the same amount that somebody at Dunkin' Donuts is making. We're talking about two different skill levels, and I support a fast-track implementation of 15 for direct care workers. And when it comes to the general population, I do support the 1010. If it was in this year's budget, I would have supported that. And as far as longer-term implementation of 15, absolutely. But the thing that I hear from businesses over and over again is that we need to be predictable, and we need to have a plan, and we need to stick to it. They can deal with these differences and these increases, but they need to understand it's coming, and they need to have time to prepare for it. So thank you.